I think I've mentioned it before, but my dreams like really fuck with my memories because I have a really hard time, and I think it's because I have aphantasia. So if you guys are not familiar, I have this condition that sounds like I'm ill or something. I'm not ill. It's like a brain thing. That sounds worse, but anyway, it's a thing that people have that affects your brain. And basically, if I close my eyes, a normal person, if you close your eyes and you tell them to imagine an apple, they can imagine an apple and see an apple. And there are like varying degrees to like this is what people call the mind's eye, right? So there are varying degrees of clarity of the mind's eye. So some people have like really intense clarity, like they can see all the details of the apple and everything when they close their eye, right? Some people can only see like a shape of an apple. Some people can only see like the black and white version of an apple, like their mind's eye doesn't show them in color. Me, I don't have a mind's eye. So when I close my eyes, I see nothing. It's just black. I also like can't hear things in my head. It's weird because I can get songs stuck in my head, but it doesn't mean that I can hear them in my head. So I like physically can't see or like I can't imagine things in my brain. I honestly thought that whenever that happened in a movie, it was like an exaggeration or like a superpower that people had. I didn't realize that like people could actually see things in their brain. Like that's absolutely fucking crazy to me. That sounds like literally sounds like a hero special ability. It's funny because when I first found this out, I was like talking to my coworker about it, and I was like, "Did you know this?" And she was like, "Oh no, I didn't know that that was a thing." And I was like, "Can you see stuff in your brain?" And she's like, "Yeah, I can even like project stuff like out to my vision." I was like, "What the fuck?" Like that sounds crazy. That sounds like some like Ready Player One shit right there. It doesn't even sound real. Yeah, so dreams are like a completely separate part of your brain. It's like a different side of your brain. So I have very vivid dreams. The issue with my memory is that I also think as a defense mechanism, my brain doesn't like to remember things. It just forgets things really, really, really easily. It's very annoying, but it's not something I have like any sort of control over. So that being combined with the fact that I have no visual memory, period. Like I cannot visualize any sort of memory thing, right? Like because I lack that function in my brain. So basically what I've seen it compared to is like having a computer with like no monitor. So everything else works fine and things are operating, it's just I can't see any of it. Like I can recognize people. It takes me a longer time to recognize people, I think, than most people. I have a hard time telling people apart sometimes and stuff too. I think my brain gets like fucked up sometimes because it can't tell if like dreams are real or a memory. Because the only thing I experience in visually is reality or my dreams, right? Because I don't have a mind's eye. So I think my brain gets confused sometimes because it's like, oh, well, you saw it. That must mean that it happened, right? Because it doesn't understand the concept of being able to like create things out of thin air since I've never been able to do that. Anyway, that's my theory on my brain. I like think about it often. I don't think because I have aphantasia that I'm like quote unquote disabled. But I do think that it is a learning disability because I think very small population has aphantasia. I think it's only like 10% of the entire population has aphantasia or something like that. So obviously people, when you're like learning something in school, the way that it's being taught to you is in a way that people who have a mind's eye would understand. So people with aphantasia obviously have a disadvantage when learning. Like when a teacher tells you to make flashcards, I didn't understand why flashcards were useful, because to me, why would you use a flashcard? Just use a fucking list. Then you don't have to spend extra money for flashcards. Like why do people use flashcards? But then I realized much later in life that people who have a mind's eye, for them, part of the flashcards that work for them is that they can literally visualize in their brain the card flipping and the card having two sides. That's what flashcards are supposed to help your brain to remember. But like for someone like me who has aphantasia, that literally makes like flashcards make no fucking sense to me. And this is like really sad if you think about it. And so if you do know anybody who has aphantasia, or if you do have aphantasia, like it's really good to kind of think about how you learn and what learning method and style works best for you. Because I think for a really long time, it's really sad because I equated the fact that I couldn't use flashcards, or like I couldn't learn the way that other people learn for certain things. Like certain things just don't click with me. And I equated that to me being stupid. But I actually like went to a very prestigious art school for a very long time. And there was a storyboarding class that I took where the teacher basically told us like, okay, well, basically what you do is like you imagine the characters in your mind, and then you imagine the camera being on the other side of the characters. And I literally was like, I can't do that. Like, I don't, and everybody else was like, okay, got it. And they were doing it. And I was literally like, am I stupid? Am I just bad at art? Do I lack an imagination? And I genuinely thought that I was like, just did not have an imagination or something. Because like the way that everyone else processed and understood something like that was just like so instantaneous and just completely different from how I process or understand anything. And I just thought I was like stupid. Like I genuinely thought that I was just like dumb. I thought, I was like, you know what? Maybe art's just like not it for me. Like I just don't have the capability that other people do to do this. And I'm just like not talented enough to understand it. And that's what I thought for a really long time. And I think that like really messed with like me and like my self-esteem and my journey with art and my relationship with art, I think was really impaired because of, I know it's not the teacher's fault either. How could he have known? He probably doesn't even know that something like aphantasia exists, right? Like there's no way for him to have known that. I can teach you. No, it's not something that can be taught. It is literally, it's like telling a blind person, I can teach you how to see. It's not how that works. My brain literally is lacking a function which allows me to visualize things. People with aphantasia also have much less likelihood of having PTSD. They have PTSD still. It's just not, it's in a very different way than people who don't have aphantasia, quote unquote, normal people, how they have PTSD. Because I think quote unquote normal people, when they have PTSD, they like literally relive the entire situation in terms of like the sounds, the smells, the environment, the imagery, like, but people who have aphantasia don't have that. We physically cannot have that. We have less, chance of getting as severe of a PTSD as somebody who is quote unquote normal. And it is hereditary because not only I think, when I researched it a bit online, it did say it's like mostly hereditary. It hasn't been proven because there hasn't been a lot of research on aphantasia, because again, 90% of the population doesn't have aphantasia. And like most people who have aphantasia don't even realize that they have aphantasia until way later on in their lives, when somebody literally tells them that they have aphantasia. Like it's not well known enough, or like people don't care about it enough, since people who have aphantasia end up just coping somehow and learning anyway. It's not like being blind where you can just like figure it out on your own. Like aphantasia, you eventually can like figure it out, right? But it's like really funny because I went to my mom and I was like, oh my god, mom, I have aphantasia. And I explained to her what it is, and I was like, I can't see anything if I close my eyes and imagine an apple. And she's like, that's normal. And I was like, oh no, you also have aphantasia. I was like, if you think that's normal, then you also have aphantasia. And my mom was like, can you do that to my dad? And my dad was like, yeah. And it was funny because my dad and I then had this conversation about him being quote unquote normal, affected him in the terms, because I was telling him like I think that's why when I was growing up I was much more partial to manga than I was to like actual novels. And when I do read novels, I prefer non-fiction. I don't really like fiction novels because it's not interesting. Because I realize that you guys are so fucking lucky because all the you normal people literally watch movies when you guys are reading a book. Like a movie plays in your fucking head. Like that's insane. You guys get free movies. I don't get free movies. Anyway, and so my dad was talking about how like when Harry Potter first came out, he was really upset at the casting because they were nothing like what he had imagined. And that was because when he read the book and he played the book in his mind movie, as you fucking aliens do, that, you know, especially Hermione, he was saying like, was just not what he had pictured in his mind at all. And I was like, that's crazy, because I literally, when I saw the movie, I was like, oh, so that's what they look like. Like for me, it's like, oh, great, now I know what they look like. I had no idea what they looked like before. So everybody in the movie looked perfect, because to me, that's all I knew, right? And when I first found out that I had aphantasia, I was actually so fucking sad. I was actually so sad. Like, I think I cried because I was just like, I feel like everyone else has had this amazing magical experience with books, with their lives. Like they can just imagine whatever the fuck they want. And here I am sitting in like darkness. I think it's really similar. Of course, being blind is way worse, but I think it is really similar to like being blind and realizing like, oh shit, not everybody is blind. Like, because to you, that's just normal. Like you don't see anything, right? Like that's just your everyday. And then you realize like, oh my God, like everyone else can do this thing that I will never be able to do. And especially as someone who at one point in my life, who I wanted to be an artist, that was devastating for me to know that no matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, I will literally never have the same like mental equipment for lack of a better word that other artists have. Like I'll always be at a disadvantage to them. But you know, I think after a while I thought about it a lot, and I thought about like how my brain has learned to like cope with the fact that it can't see things. And I think there's a lot of things that I do think I've become better for because I had aphantasia. I'm not thankful that I had aphantasia, but it definitely made me less like salty about it, I guess. I think a lot of people who have aphantasia tend to be artists and writers, because I think we have to cope with the fact that we can't express ourselves in our brain. And people like my dad and I were having this conversation about it, was saying like, you know, he had never had a desire to like create art, because if he wanted to see something, he would just see it in his brain and be satisfied with it. Whereas like for me, if I have an idea or a creative thought, the only way for me to express that is through drawing it out or writing it or something. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm not saying it's the same for everyone. I'm just saying like I think a lot of aphantasia people tend to be a little bit more on the creative side because of that. It's not like a rule that you can't be creative because you don't have aphantasia, but it's just an observation that I had. And if you are like finding out via the stream that you have aphantasia, I'm very sorry that I had to break it to you like this. That being said, I think it is shocking at first to find out that you have aphantasia, and don't feel bad for it, because I think there's a lot of really amazing people who have aphantasia, and you can still do a lot of amazing things even with that. But it is something that you have to acknowledge and you have to understand about yourself. In life, it'll help you to know that that's where you stand. You know what I mean? Anyway, when I found out I had aphantasia, I was very distressed. I was extremely distressed. Oh shit.